Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In the last decade alone, 1.3 million, I repeat, 1.3 million people have been killed in what are preventable road crashes in India. 5.3 million have been left disabled for life. Now, these numbers are truly astounding, but somehow the reality of just how bad it is out there is something that seems to have escaped public discourse. We would rather talk about the latest scam, political controversy, cricket, Bollywood, but perhaps the biggest crisis we face, along with the state of environment, is the state of our roads. So let me put this in perspective with a little more detail. India has the highest number of road crash fatalities. In economic terms, the Planning Commission has estimated in 2014 in a report that the annual cost of road crashes is 3% of our GDP. Now the government is trying to get serious about road safety. But let's face it, the pace of legislative reform has been painfully slow. The Motor Vehicles Act 1988 is horribly archaic. A new comprehensive bill was indeed drafted, but not introduced in Parliament because of stiff opposition from the states. So now what we have is the Motor Vehicle Amendment Bill 2016. It's been introduced in Parliament and is presently being reviewed by a parliamentary standing committee. Will this amendment go a long way in saving lives? That really is the question. And I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us today. I'm going to introduce our panel. Garima Bhatnagar is the Joint Commissioner of Police in Delhi. She deals with traffic in what must be one of the toughest jobs that anybody can expect anywhere in the country, in a city as large as this. Saji Cherian, Director of the SaveLIFE Foundation, has been working very closely with us on this campaign for the last several years. Rohit Baluja of IRT, always a pleasure, sir, to speak with you. And Dr. Shankar Vishwanath is consultant with the Ministry of Urban Development. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. Garima, let me come to you first. On a daily basis, in a city where people seem to look the other way when they need to be following the law, how much of a challenge is it for you personally to deal with the issues of traffic in a city where 1,000+ odd new cars enter the road each and every day?
It's a very major challenge, not only for me, but for my whole force of Delhi Traffic Police, because every day you're having almost lakhs of vehicles going on main arterial roads. And at some points, the congestion is so high where your intervention alone cannot resolve the issues, yet you're faced with situations every day. Secondly, you have a lot of people who argue with you even after violating, so it wastes a lot of time for others and for themselves. And overall, yes, road discipline is a challenge for all of us, I think almost every day.
You know, I just want to ask you, because this is an aspect we don't look at. The job of the average policeman or policewoman manning traffic in Delhi is one of the toughest jobs there is. A, there is the pollution. They are out there, it's very polluted. B, there are so many people who don't listen at all. C, the traffic density is going up each and every day. How important is it for you to motivate the men and the women that you command? Because without that sense of respect within the force, them actually performing would be so difficult. And we never talk about this, the challenges the cop on the road faces.
No, I'm so happy that this issue has been raised, because motivating a people or a staff which has to do this duty almost 10 to 12 hours every day over a period of say 10, 12 years is not something which you look at very pleasurably. When you have to stand on the roads, inhale all that smoke, as well as deal with difficult people. But some of the people do behave, which is always a pleasure when you come across such people. But generally, yes, it is a very, very challenging task. And in such scenarios, we generally try to motivate our people by doing their regular health checkups, by talking to them, by encouraging them, and also by having various workshops by which they can improve their interaction with the public, their professional interaction, and make life easier for them a little bit.
Keeping calm must be so difficult when everybody says that, look, you know, my uncle is the commissioner of police, because we live in a city where everybody has a commissioner of police who happens to be their uncle. How does the policeman or policewoman keep their calm? How important is it? Because nobody wants to pay the fine and people argue and argue and argue non-stop.
Well, it is a difficult job. You have to say no in a very, very professional manner and without losing your cool or calm. But there are very clear instructions to most of the traffic constables that come what may, as far as possible, they should make sure that they do not take such considerations into mind while they are chalaning, and they should prosecute the people as the case is.
Saji, is it a disappointment for you as somebody who's led this campaign in so many ways to get a sense of road safety in India that we don't have a proper act? What we have is an amendment to a bill. That can go a long way. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the fact that after all of these years and all of these horrific statistics, we don't still have a proper law in the country enacted by Parliament, how much of a disappointment is that?
It is a disappointment because we, in fact, a number of stakeholders work together to ensure that for the first time in India, we drafted a comprehensive legislation, understanding the gravity of the situation. Right? What we are talking about is an epidemic, something which is almost like a plague, and we are losing, even as we are talking, there are people actually dying outside. And so it was a comprehensive legislation, looked at quite a lot of aspects which were never touched before. The challenge obviously was because the way our country is, the way it is structured, it's a federal structure, and states have a lot of powers because eventually the implementation has to be at the state level. And so the opposition came from there with regard to taxation, with regard to there are certain elements in that bill which kind of looked at their powers, and that was the opposition that was faced. So yes, it was a very good bill, very comprehensive. Unfortunately, it has been put in the cold storage. What we have now is amendment bill, and I feel that that's a good step.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's been 4 to 5 months now since it has been introduced, and it's stuck at a particular level now.
Mr. Baluja, if we look at the amendment bill itself, do you believe it is potentially strong enough to actually change the lives or the way we live in our cities and outside the cities, save lives, improve the quality of life? Because a lot of what has been proposed is common sense. Offences by juveniles, there needs to be stern action. Compensation in hit and run cases. People pay nothing if someone dies in an accident. Now there is an amendment bill which actually proposes something fundamental. Youngsters, even those who are 4 years old, need to wear a helmet if they are on a two-wheeler. How much of this common sense can actually save lives?
Actually, the Act, the Motor Vehicle Act, is the primary legislation. We generally tax of what is required, the penalties, etc. But more important is the subordinate legislation, which are the rules of road regulation, which you don't have to go through the parliament. Today we have a rules of road regulation which actually determine the right of way onto the road, your respect for signs, signal, road markings, pedestrians, keeping distance between two vehicles. Now this also law has become almost old, 89. We have written the new law for the Government of India on their request. It has not been acted. If this is brought in, I believe it is much more important, along with the penalties, to control
the amendment. If you believe the amendment is brought in.
Even if the amendment is not coming, we have another way to bring about a lot of discipline onto the roads. And for this, the government doesn't have to go to the parliament.
Do you believe the amendment won't come in? Because it's with the standing committee in parliament.
Now,
Are you
now
not optimistic?
Now the amendment has problems. Now, for example, it says that if you jump a red light, you have to pay 2,000 rupee fine. If you jump it second time, your license is gone. If you look into Delhi, which is supposed to be one of the best metropolitan cities, almost 80 to 90%, other than the New Delhi district, the signals are not as per standard. They're not as per standard with respect to road markings. The police puts the signals, the road markings are by the PWD and the NDMC, and they do not match each other. Light is not coming in. And so what is happening is that you will jump a red light without doing it on purpose. The law says if you have a stop sign, if you jump a stop sign, an 8-cornered stop sign, you have a penalty of 1,000 rupees. Each and every stop sign in Delhi is not as per standard. You cannot have a stop sign on a major road. It has to be on a minor road with a stop line on it. Here you have written stop signs, stop bribing, stop raping, stop honking, and you have made a mess of it. So almost about 70 to 80% of the signages in Delhi are not as per standard. And because Delhi does it, the whole country copies it. They believe what Delhi is doing is right. Now the Honorable Minister, the government is doing a very positive thing by bringing in technology and changes in law. But the road environment is not conducive. 65% of our deaths in India happen on state and national highways. Can we fix cameras across the highways? What do we need actually is...
And so you argue that we can or we cannot?
We cannot actually. We need that the road environment on which the vehicles are run has to be conducive.
And by that you mean the way people drive?
No.
That's
the road environment, the road geometrics,
right.
The road signages, the road markings, the road signals have to be conducive to what the law wants it to be.
I just want to go to Dr. Vishwanath on this one point, because I think Mr. Baluja mentions a really important point. You know, we talk about enforcement of the law. That's all very well, but if you look at the design of our roads, it's disastrous. One look, for example, at Delhi's BRT, which used to exist, now no longer exists. But the road is not of a standard pattern after the BRT was removed. And therefore people end up thinking they're driving straight when in fact the road is not straight itself. The layout of the road is wrong. This is just one example. There would be millions of examples across the city, across the country. Who is accountable for this? Roads have already been built. How can this fundamentally change?
Definitely, taking off from what Dr. Baluja says, the most important is the infrastructure. I mean the road geometry, the design of the road, the junctions, everything needs to be perfect before we start enforcing the law. Now, enforcement is a completely different thing. It's just not for revenue earning, it's for regulating traffic. But to have a proper enforcement, a very good design of roads, as you said, or very good infrastructure is required. In fact, we have put a lot of technology into operation in Mumbai, like CCTV challans, e-challans, this and that. But if you don't mark the lanes at all, then how can you blame the man for lane cutting? If you don't mark a pedestrian crossing, how do you say that he violated it? Therefore, it's very, very important that first of all, the primary work of the traffic engineers or the civil engineers, the road engineers of that city or the PWD, whoever is responsible, has to be made accountable for all these things. And a road safety audit, whenever you create a new highway or a new road, the most important thing is to see that before it is operational, whether safety has been introduced into it by itself. So it should be self-enforcing. So the question of punishing anybody does not come in at all, because he is automatically guided by the channelizer, he is guided by the stop lines, or he is guided by the lane markings, etc. And then only all our MTP app we have got e-challan, we have got so many things will come to effect only if it is done. And it's not the question of revenue. Every time the government asks how much revenue you got by traffic fines and so on and so forth. That doesn't make any sense at all. The idea is not to earn money at all out of this.
Right.
The idea is to regulate traffic. So enforcement is secondary, regulating is primary. Sometimes the traffic policeman stops the traffic or he puts a clamp onto the parked vehicle and goes away. But that becomes itself an impediment forever. So that's not solving the problem of creating an extra lane. Therefore, more important is regulating the traffic and not standing in the middle of the road and fining. And I would say the first job of creating a good traffic environment, as you said, or a good traffic system is basically engineering. Then comes educating the drivers how to obey, and then comes enforcement.
But Mr. Baluja, have we hit a roadblock in a city like Delhi or Mumbai or Bangalore in the last few years, where the number of cars introduced is so fundamentally large that infrastructure can never keep up with that? Forget about the roads. Look at the situation of parking in our societies, where people actually kill each other for a parking spot. Unless there is legislation towards reducing the number of cars sold, can anything fundamentally be done? And it ultimately all leads down to our theme today, road safety. I would argue that the fewer cars there are, the safer our roads would be.
Road safety is a part of a good traffic management system. Traffic management system depends upon two important scientific parameters. One is transport planning and one is traffic engineering. Unfortunately, in this country, the transport departments who are responsible for traffic transport planning of a city, they are not doing it. The country is not doing it. We need to know what is the demand of people to travel from one place to another. Just take, for example, Delhi, the national capital region with 4 states in it. Do you have a coordination?
No.
Do you know that if I plan Delhi, do you know that Noida, if they plan 10 big malls in big city, will they not disrupt Delhi? So transport planning is something very important where people should not be using their private vehicles to a large extent. And unfortunately, we haven't invested on transport planning, number one. Number two, traffic engineering. You go to any developed country, every city, every highway has a traffic engineering center with traffic engineers in it. In India, not a single traffic engineering center because we believe in consultancies, outsourcing it, and they're not responsible. Now, police, which is not supposed to be doing engineering, in our police academy, where I have the opportunity to teach our IPS officers, their responsibility is not traffic engineering. But Delhi Traffic Police has to have a traffic engineering center because the road authorities are not doing it. They don't have traffic engineers, they only have civil engineers. Just for example, a law in Delhi says wherever the roads are marked by lanes for buses, only buses must ply and no other vehicles must ply. You tell me where is this law can be implemented. Number two, in a 3-lane road we have 8 lanes because we have 76% two-wheelers. And the law says that every vehicle must ply in their lane and only change the lane after giving proper signal, which implies that every vehicle on the road is violating because the infrastructure is not compatible to that.
Right.
You may put how many cameras you want to. What will I do with those cameras? I look into it and I won't be able to do anything.
Garima, do you believe that at one level, and be honest with us, your hands are essentially tied. You cannot change the infrastructure on the roads. You cannot control the power situation which dictates the operation of the red light. You cannot control 1,000,001 variables, and yet you've been put literally in the deep end of the pool to manage the chaos. Do you believe that the condition of roads, that causes accidents as well? How do you deal with the mess which is not your doing?
On a very practical level, you know that the infrastructure is not going to change very fast. So you generally adapt to the situation and you do the best that you can within the given limitations. However, we've been lucky in the sense that over a period of time, our accident research cell and our engineering cell, they all have come up in some way. Though they're not professional engineers, but we have people who over a period of time have gained experience and do generally give you a basic idea. And we've been able to coordinate with the civic agencies and other stakeholders in giving some positive suggestions. But yes, till your traffic engineering and road engineering improves, essentially you are tied to some extent, but you have to live with the limitations that you have at hand and do your best.
Saji, let's just look at a couple of the other proposals in the amendments. Offences by juveniles. There are thousands of juveniles responsible for very major accidents every single year. Do you believe that more needs to be done in terms of making parents accountable for the actions of their children who illegally drive cars or illegally ride motorcycles? It happens every day, all the time. Do you believe the juvenile justice bill needs to be responsible for punishing juveniles? Tell us a little bit about this particular concern.
So basically what the bill proposes is that the adult accountability needs to be apportioned, and it's not just the juvenile who's driving the vehicle, but also the parents who are responsible to ensure that the keys of the vehicle is not given to the juvenile. And we all know it's a known fact that many of the juveniles, especially in cities, they continue to take vehicle and drive. The bill proposes that accountability should be taken by the adults. And unless that goes down and percolates down to every adult in the system, understanding that I need to take precautions to ensure that my child does not take a vehicle and go out. So the penalties have been enhanced in it. In fact, there is a part of imprisonment as well if death occurs because of the juvenile driving. We recently had the horrendous Mercedes car accident that happened, and Siddharth lost his life while trying to cross the road. So that is one important aspect that this bill deals with. But apart from the traffic engineering part and the road engineering part, we need to understand that there are globally recognized risk factors. There are 5 risk factors that globally everybody is working towards addressing. That includes helmets, seat belts, drink driving. If we can start working on it, and this bill actually talks about it, like child helmets. We have never mentioned child helmets in our legal parlance.
It doesn't exist in the public mind space. Yeah.
But 20 children die every day in road accidents.
20 children.
20 children. And more than that under the age of 18, almost 43, 0 to 18, 43 kids die. Now, child helmets, so basic, can save lives. So when we talk about road safety, we have to talk about risk factors.
Right.
What kills? And what kills is lack of helmets, lack of seat belts, drink driving. All of these things, if can be handled both by the law as well as in the enforcement bit, we will see a reduction in deaths.
Okay, so just running out of time. So Dr. Vishwanath, here's another point that's been mentioned, the automated fitness testing of vehicles. This is something that nobody cares about. If it's got 4 wheels and it moves, it's road legal, when in fact it shouldn't necessarily be. Who would be the authority to actually say that this vehicle is fit and this vehicle is not fit?
Now, as the Minister was saying in the afternoon when he spoke, already in Mumbai, the RTO office, which has been newly constructed, Andheri, they have established center, computerized testing of the vehicles, so that the manual intervention doesn't take place and automatically the computer gives the certificates. More such centers have to be created. And even private players can come into the picture, sort of outsourcing this to them and getting the certificate. Like the Western India Automobile Association in Mumbai, they are also developing some institute at Indapur, somewhere in Maharashtra, and they are trying to develop one in Kutch. So where these people also who are sort of NGOs and interested in traffic safety, they can participate, and some private companies who are sponsoring, they can establish, and they can be authorized to sell these vehicles and give the certificates. And therefore, there will be less sort of manual, whatever you call it. There will not be such issues, and it will be automatically a perfectly tested, vehicle. And more important, adding to that, for example, the seat belt. Many people in Mumbai wear the seat belt also, even the passenger in the front. But the mom carries the child on her lap.
Yeah.
He is not wearing the seat belt. Now, in case of an accident,
the child is vulnerable.
The mom is protected, but the child is most vulnerable. So these are simple facts. So they did not even think. They thought they have done their job by putting the seat belt. So all these things, as you rightly said, is going to the public mind space. That it's for our protection that the laws are made. It's for our own safety that it's made. And we and our children and the opposite person, even other people are injured because of us or because of our mistakes. Now, for example, in Mumbai, we have got very less space. The roads are limited. Mumbai itself is an island. It's now a peninsula. And everything is north-south. Same limited road space, 3 lanes on either side, 2 lanes on either side. Traffic is increasing tremendously. 500 plus cars are being registered every day. We've got more than 30 lakh vehicles. And 3 to 4 lakh vehicles are operating. So we have only done a practical thing that in the evening, we take one more lane from the other direction, make a reversible lane. In the morning, we do it the other way around.
Right.
So the idea is to manage the traffic now. Like what you asked the police commissioner now, we manage it somehow or other, but there we take care to put those barricades in such a way, tapering angle and all, so that itself should not become an accident-prone area or a potential hazard.
One last question to you, just a suggestion or a point that he was mentioning. Do you believe it's time now in Delhi to have one-way roads at certain hours because of the crisis period?
Yes, definitely some of the arterial roads like Sardar Patel Marg and all, they're very heavy during morning time when your traffic is coming from Gurgaon into Delhi, and in the evening when they're going from Delhi to Gurgaon and outlying areas. Similarly, there are other roads also, and we are very seriously not only thinking of having some one-way roads, but we have also implemented it in some parts. And every day is a new discovery. And over a period of time, with a little junction improvement, with a little bit of junction management, with one way, with jersey barriers and all, we do all these temporary measures, and they do affect and improve the flow of traffic at some time. But I personally feel as a traffic person that it's high time that we sincerely and very, very seriously thought about road safety and better road planning, because in the next 5 to 7 years, with the way traffic is increasing in Delhi and in the NCR region, we will really need to come up with much more vigorous and much more innovative ideas than what we are having now.
All right, well, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. You know, it's just common sense at so many levels. There is a certain reality which is not favorable. It stares us at our faces day in and day out. The average speed of driving in our cities is going down every single year because of the number of cars which are added. Infrastructure has not kept up. Legislation has not kept up as well. But if you actually ultimately look at the legislation which can make a difference, all of it, each and every point is common sense. When will that common sense become reality? That really is the unanswered question. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much indeed.